Regenerative agriculture is a set of farming practices that increase biodiversity in soil organic matter. Currently, most agricultural practices are devastating to biodiversity. Even organic agriculture, while not as bad, still does more harm than good. Regenerative agriculture is a way to reverse this trend to actually make a positive impact on the land. So what does regenerative agriculture actually involve? Answering this question is actually pretty tricky, because the practices that work best largely depend on the land that's being worked with. So the variety of different practices border on infinity, a bit more than this video can cover. However, let's look at 3 common forms that regenerative agriculture can take. The soil is full of organisms which are helpful for plants. Some convert soil nitrogen into a plant-usable form. Some bring water to the plants that would otherwise be out of reach. Others loosen and aerate the soil, increasing water absorption and allowing plant roots to penetrate deeper. When soil is turned over by a machine, most of these organisms are killed, so the crops must rely on chemical fertilizer, which ends up leaching into the water. Central to no-till farming is to not do that. Instead of tilling, plant cover crops whose roots break up the soil. Let the worms aerate the soil and bring down nutrients. Keep the soil covered with an organic mulch which will break down over time, adding more organic matter to the soil. From the release of methane to clearing forests for pasture land, cattle raising is known for being very environmentally destructive. But this is not inherent to grazing animals. If the right practices are put in place, enormous amounts of carbon can be sequestered into the ground, soil can be built, and even desertification can be reversed in a matter of years. Here's how it works. The growth of grass tends to start slow, accelerate, and slow down again. This middle area is where it accrues the most biomass the most efficiently. If it's eaten before it gets to this point, its growth will never speed up. This is what happens with traditional pastured animals. They eat all the grass, which doesn't have the chance to grow back fast enough before getting eaten again, and we have overgrazing. This leads to soil erosion, drought, and desertification. But if the animals are kept in a tightly packed herd, like they used to be in nature, the grass has time to grow before being eaten. All that biomass in the grass is carbon that comes from the air. Not all of the grass gets eaten, however. Some of it gets pooped on and trampled, which ends up creating the perfect conditions for new topsoil to be built. This ends up happening incredibly quickly. This is one of the most complex and location-dependent practices there are. I will therefore be overgeneralizing a bit. It always starts with observing a local forest and the relationships between everything in it. The plants, the animals, the fungi, the landscape, the soil, the water, and then recreating these relationships in a way that's just as ecologically resilient, but produces more food. Food forests are often thought of as comprising 7 layers: the root layer, the ground cover layer, the herb layer, the shrub layer, the low tree layer, the high tree layer, and the vine layer. Every one of these layers either produces some sort of food or medicine, or is in some way helpful to the system as a whole. The plants are mostly perennials and include as many native species as possible. These 3 examples of regenerative agriculture, plus all the rest of them, all have something in common. Whereas in conventional agriculture, you seek to create as many of one thing as possible, in regenerative agriculture, you seek to create as many relationships between things as possible. You are one of those things. What sort of relationship with the land do you want to foster?
As I begin, let me share with you one of my favorite stories. Many years ago, the old country fair in parts of England was, besides being the place of exhibition for farm products, the place where employer and employee met. Farmer Smith wanted a boy to work on his farm. He was interviewing some candidates when a thoughtful-looking lad of about 16 attracted his attention. The gruff old agriculturist asked the boy, "What can you do?" The boy swung back at him in the same style. "I can sleep when the wind blows." Even though the farmer didn't particularly like the teenager's answer, there was something about his gray eyes that got under the farmer's skin. He asked the lad the same question. "What did you say you would do?" Again, the answer bounced back. "I can sleep when the wind blows." Farmer Smith was still disgusted with and confused by the answer, and he went to other parts of the fair to look into the faces of other young men who might want a job on his farm. But there was something about that answer that stuck to him like glue. First thing he knew, his feet were carrying him back to meet the steady gaze of those deliberate eyes on the boy. with such a strange way of speaking. "What did you say you could do?" he thundered for the third time. For the third time, he got the same answer. "I can sleep when the wind blows. Get in my wagon, we'll try you out." One night, several weeks later, Farmer Smith awoke about 2 a.m. to what sounded like a cyclone. It seemed that gusts from the north had developed with such intensity that they threatened the roof over his head. The trees cracked. The noises outside electrified the nervous system. The speed with which he jumped into his trousers was outdone only by the lightning that split the darkness outside. With shoes half-laced, he rushed out into the farmyard to see if anything on the premises was still intact, and he knew he would need the services of the new hired boy. He called up the stairs to the attic where the boy slept, but the response was the healthy breathing of a sleeping lad. He went halfway up the stairs and thundered again, but only a snore echoed back. In his excitement, he went to the boy's bed and did everything to wake the youth but tear the bedclothes from him. The lad slept on. With a mixture of desperation and disgust, he faced the gale and plunged alone out into the farmyard. He first approached the cow barn. Lo and behold, the milk producers were peacefully chewing their cud, and inside their abode, they were all snug as a mouse under a haystack. It didn't take him long to discover how the boy had chinked up the cracks of the cow barn and reinforced the locks and hinges. In the pig pen, he discovered the same tranquility, even though the wind howled on. He turned to the haystack. As he groped in the darkness, it didn't take him long to discover again the preparation of the lad with the gray, steady eyes. Every few feet on that feed stack, he had placed and weighted wires on each side. With this protecting construction, the alfalfa was peacefully under control, laughing at the elements. The farmer was stunned by the revelations that had come to him in a few short minutes on the night of that cyclone. He dropped his head. His mental maneuver shot like lightning to the boy snoring in the attic. Again, the peculiar answer of a few weeks ago slapped him in the face. "I can sleep when the wind blows." Brothers and sisters, this young man displays what to me personifies character, honor, and integrity. He summarized what he was in 7 simple words. "I can sleep when the wind blows." Without being flashy, he knew exactly who he was. And when the test came, he didn't need to question what he would do. He had already made the decision in his life. Regardless of the circumstances, he would be prepared. His word was his bond. I want to talk to you today about what it means to be able to sleep when the wind blows. I want to talk to you about being the best you and living your lives with character, honor.
Healthy plants need healthy soil for healthy growth. To be able to precisely absorb what plants need, the soil needs to contain minerals and the necessary soil life. Research shows that the widespread use of synthetic fertilizer leads to soils that no longer have the required biology for healthy plant growth. Fertilizer comes from a time in which there was no understanding of the long-term effects on the soil. For farmers, fertilizer was a miracle. The harvests doubled, and growers were able to provide the required food for a growing population. But now, after years of using synthetic fertilizers, the effects on soil quality are apparent. Increasingly, it is seen that fewer nutritional minerals remain in the soil, resulting in plants that quickly become weak and diseased. They are no longer protected by bacteria and fungi, but instead are attacked by them. As well as this, using fertilizer means that these days farmers need to plow deeper as the ground becomes quickly compacted. This is a costly business for farmers and is disastrous for the soil. There is a better way. It is not widely known, but the roots of plants are able to develop more easily in an environment rich in old roots. Here you can see the current plowing method, in which the soil is turned to 25 centimeters. This means that the plant really struggles to reach the thousands of passageways that other plants have created with their roots. They often don't even reach through the plow pan, which is caused by plowing the land with heavy machinery. A surface cultivation method can offer a solution to this. This shallow soil processing means that the roots are quickly able to access the passageways left by decomposing roots. In this situation, they only have to work really hard once they reach the extremities of the passageways. This means that they can root deeper year after year and ensures that there is even more soil and water available for growth. Dealing with diseases by spraying does little more than suppress symptoms. A healthy plant is able to keep most plant diseases out. In response to the negative effects of using fertilizers, pesticides are used to save the harvest. The conclusion we can draw is that plants that are only given fertilizer will ultimately always become diseased. Fertilizer is the direct cause of the use of most pesticides. In order to resolve the worldwide problem of over-fertilization, the vicious circle must be broken. The question that we must ask ourselves is, how can we improve the soil? The answer is surprisingly simple, but requires some explanation. Just like every other organism on the planet, a plant does not function independently. Health and growth depends on a partnership between specialist bacteria and fungi. Plants, fungi and bacteria form a wonderful system based on trading products. How does it work? Fungi and bacteria supply nutrients from the soil that would otherwise be hard to reach. In exchange for this, plants supply sugars in the form of glucose. To explain this system, we will explain bacteria and fungi separately. Plants have a problem. Their fine absorption roots have a limited capacity. They only use 4 to 7% of the soil volume and are, on average, not thicker than a hair. They don't live long, only 1 to 3 weeks. As you can see, plants need external help. Plants use their absorption roots to forge a partnership. If they can't find partners, they'll die. If they succeed, it's the start of a beautiful relationship. From now on, a symbiosis can be created. Minerals are hard to mine from the soil, but rhizobacteria are specialized in this process, particularly when it comes to releasing phosphate, which is very important for the plant. These bacteria also carry out countless other important tasks, including one which is very special. Rhizobacteria form a sort of natural defense system around the roots. Anything attacking the plant is kept outside by the physical presence of these rhizobacteria. They ensure that there is no room for disease-causing bacteria. They have their own interest in this because the plant provides them with food. However, the bacteria also need help. They are not travelers. The bacterial colonies do not move back and forth from minerals to the roots. Most minerals found in soil are located outside the reach of the roots, and therefore also out of the reach of rhizobacteria. These can only live near the roots. As we have seen before, the zone of absorption is therefore very limited. Mycorrhizal fungi are able to drastically increase this absorption capacity. It may sound like a modern development, but it's not. The fungus has always existed, but due to modernization, its role has been neglected. Due to many years of using synthetic fertilizers, mycorrhiza is only very sporadically found in agricultural soils. Mycorrhizal fungi have always lived in symbiotic relation with the plant roots. Mycorrhizal fungus forms a living connection within the roots and creates an absorption and transport system. This is essential for healthy plant growth. Mycorrhiza in the roots is just as normal as chlorophyll in the leaves. This is beyond doubt. As stated before, the absorption roots of plants are 0.2 millimeters thick. This means that they can only grow in macropores, as shown here. Now we zoom in to see what happens when the plant gets help from the mycorrhizal fungus. The fungal threads are even thinner than most bacteria. They are only as thick as 3 microns. This means that these thin threads grow easily in the micropores, where the majority of nutrients and water are stored. Without help, a plant would never be able to reach these areas. It's not just the roots, but also the fungal threads that are responsible for the absorption of nutrients and water. The long, thin fungal hyphae that fully takes over the absorption of materials from the roots are able to provide disease resistance. Distantly located minerals that are bound to iron and calcium are now easier to absorb. These fine threads or hyphae can easily be a kilometer long in just 1 teaspoon of soil. Mycorrhizal fungi cause absorption capacity to be 7 times higher in average. This means that growing can be done with less water and that weeds have far less chance to thrive due to competition for space. The benefit to the fungi is the glucose produced by the plants. For the plants, the benefit is a larger absorption zone. This unique and constant interaction between the plant, bacteria and fungi creates a really fantastic symbiosis. The payout that the plant provides to its partners is water, minerals, and glucose. The partnership between soil and roots requires healthy soil biology. Healthy soil contains organic matter from dead leaves, dead roots, and dead animals. This dead organic matter is broken down in nature by soil life to become humus. This creates a great deal of food for soil life, and the soil retains plenty of CO2. Years of using fertilizer has caused the humus to disappear from agricultural land. You could think of humus as the battery of the soil. It's where the energy is stored, the energy that the soil life needs to do its work. Without the humus, it is almost impossible to achieve natural soil recovery. It has long been thought that nitrogen fertilizer stimulates the soil life as more bacteria are able to grow. But to maintain their carbon-nitrogen balance, they are compelled to consume more organic material, which then enters the atmosphere as CO2. The symbiosis between plant, fungi, and bacteria is not only a great partnership, it is absolutely vital. Without these transformers of organic material, we would all perish in excess organic material. Returning to the question we asked previously about how we can improve the soil, the answer must be, ultimately, plants improve the soil on their own. They do this through the symbiosis between plants, bacteria, and fungi. Plants are really the only soil improvers. Here we can see a clear difference between an absorption system without and with mycorrhiza fungi. The plant on the left is entirely dependent on the pH value of the soil and the supply of minerals. The plant on the right has roots that are able to optimally self-regulate the pH level and absorption via mycorrhiza fungi. This results in a healthy absorption that works perfectly with organic fertilizers. Using this natural system, we will achieve healthy soil that in turn brings healthy plants that can produce healthy fruit and vegetables. The way we deal with our soil has a direct effect on the emission of CO2 and the nutritional value of our food.
planet Earth, home to a growing number of Homo sapiens and a whole lot of other creatures. It's a great place to live. But when it comes to the future of our small planet,
now to a dire warning about climate change.
Natural disasters like hurricanes or wildfires.
An unprecedented decline in nature threatening humanity.
6th mass extinction event is already well.
There's so much bad news about our planet, it's overwhelming. The fear that we're headed for a cliff puts most of us into a state of paralysis. The truth is, I've given up. And the odds are, so have you. But what if there was another path? This is the story of a simple solution, a way to heal our planet and keep our species off the extinction list. In fact, the solution I'm talking about is right under our feet. And it's as old as dirt. We call it soil, earth, or ground. And due to its vast scale and its ability to sequester immense quantities of greenhouse gases, it could just be the one thing that can balance our climate, replenish our freshwater supplies, and feed the world. That's why some people are racing to save our soil, in hopes our soil just might save us.
I am a conservation agronomist. I have been in every state, all the way from Alaska to Puerto Rico to Hawaii. I've also been asked to go speak in Europe, Australia. I just haven't had the time. If we get the soil right, we can fix a lot of our issues. Healthy soils lead to a healthy plant, healthy animal, healthy human, healthy water, healthy climate. This is what this is about today. Learning how the soil works and learning how to farm like nature does. I have learned my job is to drop a seed. And the more you farm like nature, the more we can reduce your inputs and the more money you can make. It's my calling. Just as simple as that. Actually, this might be women. I've lived in 4 or 5 states. Everywhere I go and work, we're still having the same problem. Massive erosion. Erosion is when soil becomes dirt.
Rapid erosion began long ago when humans developed the plow. Its purpose was to break the soil in order to sow seeds. By the Bronze Age, vast areas around cities were plowed up to plant grains. But as their soils eroded, those once great empires vanished into dust. But we don't have to look back thousands of years to see the dangers of erosion. In the 1930s, America experienced the largest man-made environmental disaster in history. It was called the Dust Bowl. It was largely caused by farmers tilling the once fertile Midwestern plains and leaving the soil exposed. By the end of 1934, roughly 200 million acres of cropland were permanently damaged. On a whistle-stop train tour, President Franklin D. Roosevelt saw the destruction of America's soil firsthand. In response, he created the Soil Conservation Service to save the nation's soil.
What I have seen confirms me in the belief that I've had for a long time that we're going to win on this problem. It relates to working out a plan of cooperation with nature instead of going along with what we've been doing in the past, trying to buck nature.
The practice of plowing and tilling the soil continues to this day. But so does Franklin D. Roosevelt's Soil Conservation Service. It was made part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and it's now called the Natural Resources Conservation Service, the NRCS.
We want the water to leave through a living plant.
Today, NRCS field agents, like Ray, try to teach farmers to reduce tilling.
Microbes live in there, and that's called the porosphere.
And reduce the spraying of industrial chemicals that damage the soil.
Tillage is one of the most intrusive things we do in modern agriculture. It is not our friend.
The message is simple. But getting that message out is difficult.
We have a social problem. We have an education issue. And until we get that right, we can't fix our ecological issues. I have been in NRCS for 31 years. It was kind of amazing to me as I was teaching all over the country. I'm going, wow, our producers don't really know how the soil works. They don't understand the basic ecological principles. Everything runs by carbon. We're built by carbon. The soil microbes run by carbon. Carbon is the driving engine. It runs the system.
But when it comes to the role of carbon in our world, there's a bit of confusion. To be specific, carbon dioxide is a gas. We breathe it out, and plants breathe it in. We also make carbon dioxide by burning fossil fuels. But carbon isn't bad. In fact, it's the basis for all life on Earth.
There's a tendency right now for us to be at war with carbon. Carbon's the bad guy, and I think this is a lost opportunity. Carbon's the good guy. We're carbon. I'm 16% carbon, and all of it came from eating vegetation and things that eat vegetation.
Plants use sunlight as energy, and they pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. They turn it into a carbon fuel, and that's how they grow. But 40% of that carbon fuel, they send down to their roots. They're leaking it out in a very strategic way to soil microorganisms. Plants are feeding soil microorganisms carbon, and the soil microorganisms are bringing plants mineral nutrients. And in the process of all that, those soil microorganisms make a carbon glue out of that carbon fuel. And they make habitat in the soil. They make little pockets in the soil to control the flow of air and water. And that's one of the ways that carbon gets fixed in the soil.
In other words, soil has the unique ability to sequester carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. That's a big deal. And what's even more amazing? The soil contains an entire universe of life.
Here I went to years of college, and I took soil science. I didn't know. I really did not know how the soil worked. It's alive.
Cells in your body than you have human cells.
Yeah, we're about 1% human and 99% microbes. It's the truth.
The food that we eat, we actually chew and break that food material down into little bits that get eaten by the bacteria in our gut. When you eat kale, let's say, when you're eating kale, your body doesn't consume kale. The bacteria consume the kale. And you feed off of what the bacteria have processed and released by the consumption of that kale.
The key to health is eating dirt. And what I mean by that is we need to eat what's in the dirt that's transferred to the plants that then we eat and create health.
You know, my husband is an athlete for a living, so he wants to provide his body with the best possible nutrients so he can perform.
I beat my body down so much over the course of the season. The last thing I want to do is add a bunch of food that I won't be able to properly digest, that won't be the kind of nutrition that I need in order to repair and regenerate my body the way that it needs to be.
And of course, the quality of the soil is huge because it's the beginning of the quality of the food. That quality food provides quality health. It all comes from the earth, Big Mama. Our health and the health of our planet are connected. If we choose healthy food, there's a reciprocation. Not only we feel better, we are healthier, but the earth is healthier.
Taking care of the microbes in the soil is critical for human health. But spraying the soil with toxic chemicals, well, does something else.
All of our soils that are under chemical conventional agriculture are almost completely devoid of microorganisms.
Spraying the soil with toxic chemicals kills the very microbes we need to give us health and pull the carbon from the atmosphere. The more tilling that's done, the weaker the soil gets, and the more farmers feel compelled to use chemical sprays. This is the vicious cycle of industrial agriculture. And that cycle was developed as a result of war. The roots of industrial agriculture go back to a German scientist named Fritz Haber. Haber invented a process for making synthetic nitrogen fertilizer that increased food production. His other scientific breakthrough was the creation of poisons known as pesticides. Haber used his pesticides as the first chemical weapons in history. Then he developed the poison used in the gas chambers of the Holocaust. When the war ended, U.S. chemical companies brought Haber's poisons back to America and rebranded his toxic chemicals as pesticides for American farms.
Dow set out to demonstrate the effectiveness of its chemical killers on a nationwide scale.
When the war ended, all the energy that went into fighting the enemies in the world went into fighting the enemies on the farm.
All of a sudden, chemical fertilizer, nitrogen was available, and farmers could toss that on a field. Or even if they hadn't taken care of their soil, they could get a good crop for a while.
Together, these wartime innovations created the most powerful industrial food production system the world had ever seen.
We created an infrastructure around single types of industry, and then we decoupled livestock and row crop production. We found people who were really good at raising livestock, and you found people who were really good at growing row crops, and you split those two camps.
That ushered in this big philosophical shift in terms of how we approached farming. Instead of understanding and honoring natural processes, we could just throw out these chemicals. We just throw out more and more of them. It kept going up and up and up.
It takes more nitrogen now to raise a bushel of grain than it did in 1960.
Our chemical fertilizers mask the problem of degraded soils. Modern agriculture was not designed for the betterment of the soil.
Today, our most common crops are genetically altered to resist the spraying of toxic pesticides. For example, the #1 crop in the United States, field corn, is almost entirely sprayed with glyphosate, a chemical suspected to cause cancer that's so oversprayed, it's found its way into our drinking water.
These chemicals, which were considered dangerous to begin with, are now being used at rates that would have been inconceivable 20 years ago.
Every year, for every American alive, 3 pounds of toxic chemicals are sprayed onto the food grown on our farms.
That goes into the soil, it goes into the water, it goes into our bodies. It's not just on the food you eat, it's everywhere.
Most of the agricultural industry's pesticides and herbicides transfer directly through breast milk to babies. There are over 200 peer-reviewed studies that correlate the spraying of these toxic chemicals to effects like ADD in children, pediatric cancers, and birth defects. That's why juries have begun to award billions of dollars in damages to people who contracted cancer after using glyphosate.
We know, for example, that glyphosate, which is also known as Roundup, has an effect on the gut microbiome that may lead to disturbances that can create disease, including cancer.
A big reason these chemicals make us sick is because just as toxic chemicals kill the microbes in the soil, they also kill the microbes in our bodies.
What I tell people is, your body can handle acute stresses, but it cannot handle chronic stresses. Soil ecosystems the same way. If you keep dumping the fungicides, you keep dumping the herbicide, you keep dumping the insecticides, you keep doing the tillage, chronic stress, it doesn't function anymore.
Since chemical agriculture ramped up worldwide in the 1970s, we have lost 1/3 of the Earth's topsoil. But industrial agriculture isn't just harming our soils, it's also affecting something much larger.
The most massive tsunami, perfect storm is bearing down upon us. But fossil fuels, carbon, coal, and gas, are by no means the only thing that is causing climate change. Now, because the fate of water and carbon are tied to soil organic matter, when we damage soils, you give off carbon. Carbon goes back to the atmosphere.
Healthy soils absorb water and carbon dioxide. But when we destroy soil, it releases water and carbon dioxide. This dries out the soil and turns it into dust. The process is called desertification. And how we deal with it could determine the fate of more than just our climate.
Desertification is a fancy word for land that is turning to desert. And this happens only when we create too much bare ground.
Soil and the plant and the climate are connected. If you don't have a living plant, you're going to have more evaporation. What we want is transpiration. When the moisture leaves through the plant, when it does that, it increases humidity, and when it increases the humidity, we have more rain. 60% of our rainfall comes from the ocean. But a lot of people don't realize 40% comes from small water cycles where our rain comes from inland. What's going on is we disrupted the small water cycles. That's when you have too much sensible heat coming off bare soil. You're having these huge vortexes of hot air going out. Instead of attracting the rain, it's pushing the rain clouds away.
Take 1 square meter of soil and make it bare, and I promise you, you will find it much colder at dawn and much hotter at midday than that same piece of ground if it's just covered with plant litter. You have changed the microclimate. Now, by the time you are doing that on more than half the world's land, you are changing macroclimate.
Desertification of our soils is a pressing threat to our climate and our species.
But I have for you a very simple message. About 2/3 of the world is desertifying.
As soils turn to dust around the world, every year 40 million people are pushed off their land. By 2050, it's estimated that 1 billion people will be refugees of soil desertification.
More than 20 civilizations in all regions of the world have failed because of agriculture damaging the environment. Their communities could not handle the deteriorating environment and the rising population. Globally, that's what we're doing today. Poor land leads to poor people. Poor people leads to social breakdown. Poor land leads to increasing frequency of floods and droughts, mass emigration across borders and into cities, and it's leading to ideal recruitment conditions.
What we know right now is the way we're feeding ourselves is undermining the very ecology that we're dependent upon. So the long-term prognosis for our survival on this planet, given business as usual, is very, very poor.
According to the United Nations, the world's remaining topsoil will be gone within 60 years. In other words, unless we find a way to save our soils, we have 60 harvests left. The global scale of the problems we face may seem insurmountable. But in every fight that seems unwinnable, there are those who refuse to give up.
Let's do that. Do a couple of demos.
We're very fortunate to have Ray Archuleta with us today. Ray, as you can tell, is someone that has quite a bit of notoriety. He's got his own reality show. Now with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Ray. And Ray, we appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Ray.
This is a supercomputer model by NASA. We're concerned of the red and purples being CO2. I want you to notice the dates. That is February, March. Now, what are we doing March, April? What do we do in modern agriculture in April? We are tilling. We're tilling the land. And look at the huge plumes of CO2. Look at the dates. May. Now, let's see what happens around June. Look at the colors change. Ladies and gentlemen, what is happening in June? Do you see how powerful the living plants are? Can you imagine if we had all our rangeland and all our cropland covered? A covered planet is a healthy planet. We can fix a lot of our climate issues if we bring the CO2 down into a living plant and put it back into the soil where it belongs.
Agriculture is the biggest way that humans impact our landscape. We have unleashed through agriculture over the centuries, over the millennia, carbon from the land, and it's now up in the atmosphere. It's now part of that legacy load of carbon dioxide. Many people are coming to this discussion about soil health because it can bring that carbon back down and put it in the ground.
The first seasoned environmentalist and the editor of Draw Down, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. Please welcome Paul Hawken. Tell us why your plan is different and why it is the most comprehensive.
Well, it's very different because it's the first one ever. You cannot achieve drawdown without biosequestration. Biosequestration is using plants, trees, perennials, and techniques of grazing and farming to capture carbon and store it in the sink of the soil and retain it for decades, if not centuries. What we did is map, measured, and modeled the 100 most substantive solutions to global warming. And what I mean by solutions, I mean things that are at hand. We know how to do it. They're scaling. And if we continue to scale in a rigorous but reasonable way over 30 years, we can reverse global warming.
When you talk to people about this great technology that has existed for millions of years that takes carbon out of the atmosphere and stores it safely in the soil, and that it's called plants working with soil microorganisms, it seems too simple.
I'm going back to the earth. I'm going back.
Regenerative agriculture grows more food per acre. It's scalable to our entire agricultural system, and what's more, it's already being done right now, today.
I'm a rancher. That's how I prefer to be thought of, as I'm a rancher. A farmer technically grows crops. A rancher raises livestock. Why I like to be considered a rancher is because I'm all about living things and taking part in living ecosystems. And to me, that's what my operation's about, a living ecosystem. We purchased this place in 1991, and for the first 2 years, I was farming conventionally. Heavy tillage, high use of synthetics. 1995 came along, and the day before I was going to start combining, I lost 100% of our crop to a hailstorm. So we were totally wiped out. No income from our crops. That was really tough to take because we didn't have crop insurance. 1996 came along, we lost 100% of our crop to hail again. 1997 came along, we dried out. Nobody combined an acre. There was a major drought in this area. 1998 came along and we lost 80% of our crop to hail. So we were 4 years with basically no crop income. The neighbors were all taking bets and waiting for my land. Times were really getting tough financially, and the banker didn't want to loan me any money to buy inputs. Best thing that could have happened. I wasn't gonna fail. I really had to start focusing, how can I make this farm and ranch get these soils to produce a crop without all these inputs? So I started to be a studier of soil ecosystems. I actually went back and I read Thomas Jefferson's old journals because I was trying to figure out how did they do this previous to the use of all these synthetics.
We have been promoting no-till for many, many years. No-tillage means you don't till the soil at all. You just plant directly into it.
This is a no-till drill. No-till drills are available everywhere in the world. This will help you grow topsoil. Any type of tillage equipment will destroy topsoil. This is your firming wheel. This holds this residue so the disc here can cut it. Just making a small slit. The seed travels down at a specific rate per acre. This comes around, moves a small amount of soil right over that seed. We're keeping all this armor on the soil surface in order to protect the soil from wind erosion, water erosion, so we can grow crops on much less moisture with this type of a system. Rain falls on this, it's gonna go right into the soil. Rain falls on bare soil, it's gonna run off, and then it's gonna evaporate very quickly.
Soil that is not tilled stores more water, thus increasing microbe growth, which leads to more plant growth and even to more local rainfall. This is the virtuous cycle of regeneration. Gabe Brown's soil is also pulling more carbon out of the atmosphere. For every 1% increase in organic matter, an acre of soil draws down 10 more tons of carbon.
I mean, that's huge. We have to reduce tillage. We got to grow cover crops. We have to get a living root all the time. We can't have these bare periods with nothing growing on them. We've got to start using these principles to restore the water cycle. And it is fixable. So I'm taking it to a field here that is a multi-species cover crop. The purpose of a cover crop is to enhance the life and the function of the soil. Think of it this way, if I'd grow a monoculture on this field, would only be feeding the soil biology one type of root exudate. I'm growing 19 species here. We're accelerating biological time. We're feeding the soil biology what it would take a conventional farmer 19 years to do. I'm doing it in 1 year. So people might ask, how do you get any money from this thing? Our livestock will graze this during the winter, speeding up the process of regenerating those soils. Animals grazing living plants are a part of the carbon cycle. Here in the northern plains, our soils were formed by large herds of bison and elk being moved by predators, grazing a landscape, trampling that carbon, the plants onto the soil surface, not coming back for maybe a year, allowing full recovery.
It wasn't that long ago that over 60 million buffalo roam the continent. In an attempt to starve the Native Americans, the U.S. military and the railroads killed most of the buffalo. By the time the culling ended, only a few thousand of the majestic animals remained. Where buffalo once roamed, industrial agriculture now grows. Hundreds of millions of acres of crops, just to feed animals. And those animals are concentrated into feedlots. In turn, feedlots produce a tremendous amount of greenhouse gases.
A feedlot situation has a positive amount of greenhouse gases being emitted. In a grazing situation, the data shows that we actually get greenhouse gases sequestered. So in one situation, you get emissions, in the other situation, you get sequestration.
The problem isn't the animal. The problem is where the animals are at.
Cows can be good. That is one of the most controversial statements of mankind at this point. Using cattle, allowing them to roam and graze and planned grazing can literally revive enough space to create a tremendous amount of drawdown. I'm from Southeast Louisiana. I grew up in an incredibly delicate ecosystem. Conservation was always a very serious part of my life. I had no idea that the earth was desertified. I got on a plane from New York City to fly to Zimbabwe to meet Alan Savory, so he could show us the difference between desertification and regeneration. Land that has been holistically managed through planned grazing using cattle, the most vilified animal in the world.
We are in Africa right now, driving through a field that has been under Alan Savory's holistic management for 9 years. And it is in Eden. This is what you call high grass.
Using livestock to reverse desertification is totally scalable to about 2/3 of the world's land. And nothing else is. And frankly, that can be done at extremely low cost.
Here we are. This is what it should be like. You've been working on this land for 8 or 9 years. It went from a place of turning into a total desert and using hooved, herding herbivores. You have literally transformed that, what we've been seeing, into this. How in the hell do you make this happen?
So dung, the urine, and the hooves of the animals are what cause this grass to grow. That livestock is never on more than a hectare of this land, about 2.5 acres, never more than 3 days.
Right.
And they're never back on that piece of land under about 6 to 9 months.
Wow.
So no plant can get overgrazed. You can come any day of the year, anywhere on this land, and you will see no livestock, because they will be on less than 1 hectare of land. Unless we take you there, you won't even know it.
Dealing with this beast of climate change, a lot of people don't understand that this helps climate change. This sequesters carbon. This takes the one thing that we so desperately need out of the air, and it holds it, and it makes oxygen.
Yeah, if we can produce solid grassland, you can pull down enormous amounts of carbon back into the soil. 2/3 of the world, roughly, is grasslands and savannas where the rainfall is too low to support a solid canopy of trees giving you soil cover. So grass is essentially what has to stabilize that soil.
You look at this and you realize this is what the world should look like. This is what Africa should look like. This is what South and Central America should look like. This is what Texas should look like.
This is how we win. We can get the earth back to the Garden of Eden that it once was by regeneration.
When used smartly, herbivores can pull down carbon and reverse desertification. But it doesn't just work for Africa. It works everywhere in the world.
It's long pants today, right? You guys are gonna ride horses?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was raised in a rural area in Washington, adopted by a Lakota elder. We were out in nature every day. I found permaculture, and that was very influential in my life, where I could see that there could be a permanent agriculture, an agriculture that not only fed the planet, but also fed the people in a way that regenerated and didn't deplete resources.
Holistic ranchers like the market guards use careful planning so their cows sequester carbon and actually regenerate the land.
So this is our grazing plan and control chart. This tells us where we're planning to have the cattle wet. Let's see, it's July 22nd. So they were in G1 and they are going to move here. All these paddocks correlate with a map that I have here. So these are all segments of fencing where the cattle are. It tells me how big it is. I can record observations, species, all right in here in the field.
We manage over 8,000 acres throughout the Bay Area, so we're constantly on the move.
I never get bored. I never get bored.
They call cows mobile microbe tanks, because cows employ microbes in their rumen to break down the fibers in food. So when cows poop, that is just like a steaming mound of microbes dumped onto the land, and it's a powerful stuff for the land.
So it's been about 3 months since the cattle have been in this pasture. Did you hear that little pop when I popped it out? That was all these root hairs popping off. There's just thousands and thousands of feet of these root hairs that are interconnected with all of these other bunch grasses and all of these other species through their root hairs and also through the mycorrhiza fungi. The cattle will come along and they'll eat the tops off. What happens when the grasses get bitten off is these roots slough off. And what is that root made out of? Carbon. We're taking carbon from the atmosphere via photosynthesis into the plant, and then it's going through the plant into the root system, that carbon, and it sloughs off and turns into humus, where it belongs. The form of agriculture that we use creates billions of lives in the form of soil microbes, in nematodes, in grassland birds. All of that wildlife is flourishing under an agriculture system versus a tilled crop field, which is denuded of life.
And the vast majority of those tilled fields grow one thing: animal feed. Corn, soy, and hay. These crops and the feedlots that rely on them exist only because they are subsidized by our tax dollars.
I was speaking to a group of corn and soybean producers from Missouri this past winter, and the one guy stood up and said, "Why would I want to plant anything else than corn and beans when I'm guaranteed a profit before I even go in the field?"
The United States Department of Agriculture uses something called the Commodity Credit Corporation to give farmers price guarantees for growing specific crops. In the current system, taxpayers subsidize farmers to grow the crops that feed the animals that live in feedlots which emit greenhouse gases. The result? Our land is turning to dust and our farmers are going bust.
And then I come back and ask them, now, how much money would you be making if the government wasn't subsidizing your operation? And they know the answer. They're not going to be making money. I dropped off all those programs. I tell producers I don't want to be on welfare anymore.
Even with genetically altered seeds, chemical sprays, and government subsidies, most farmers struggle to make a few dollars per acre. But on its 5,000 acres, Brown's Ranch generates over $100 profit per acre per year.
If you build a healthy farm ecosystem, you're going to be resilient. You're going to take the risk out of it. Yes, I grow corn. I don't grow soybeans, but I grow peas.
That's good.
But I also grow wheat and barley and oats and vetch and triticale and alfalfa, grass-finished beef, lamb, pork, honey, vegetables, all these other products. I could care less what the price of corn or beans are because they're such a small fraction of my operation. I've built resiliency into the ecosystem.
Most of the land that's managed by farmers is owned by somebody other than the farmer. We believe landowners, as they come to understand the long-term benefits of managing for soil health, will encourage their farmers to prioritize this. Once a farmer starts to manage for soil health and see those economic benefits, they won't turn back.
By switching to regenerative agriculture, American farmers could increase their profits by over $100 billion annually and virtually eliminate their subsidies.
You know, we have a motto on our operation. We want to sign the back of the check and not the front. It's a pretty good motto. It leaves a lot more in your pocket. The federal farm program we have today is the most detrimental thing there is to regenerative agriculture.
In order for our governments to support the shift to regeneration, the people may have to lead the way. And the odds are there are some things that you can do to save our soils. Today.
This is everybody's life, every hour of the day almost. Food waste.
Yeah, food waste is ubiquitous. Everybody does it.
Well, not everybody does it.
The best known host of Catesia congregata is perhaps the tobacco hornworm, Manduca sexta, commonly found on tobacco, tomato, and other solanaceous plants. This one right here has been parasitized, and the larvae have already emerged and spun cocoons on the caterpillar surface. They will emerge within the next few days and fly off seeking new hosts. Another host of Catesia congregata is the catappa hornworm, Ceratomia catappi. These caterpillars are specialists on catappa trees. They are capable of defoliating entire trees when they're in high numbers. This caterpillar right here has already been parasitized by the wasp. The larvae have egressed out of the host and spun cocoons on the caterpillar surface.
Hey, this is Joe with Grow It Build It. Today I'm going to tell you how to make compost, a complete tutorial. So you've probably heard that compost is a gardener's best friend. It's the absolute best thing you can use to fertilize flowers, trees, shrubs, vegetables. I even top dress it on my lawn in the wintertime just to add some organic matter. It's just all around good stuff. The broken down organic matter is full of nutrients that are slow released. The plants take them when they need them. You can break up hard compacted clay soil with compost. It'll make it drain better. You can also add it to sandy soil to make it hold water better. There's really this is the universal best awesome thing you could possibly have to add to any kind of plant. They all love it. Now I am a member of a lot of gardening groups and internet forums, and a lot of times when someone gets on there and they're a newbie and they ask, how do I start composting? They often get bombarded with a lot of technical information. And it's like some people just like to make stuff so much more complicated than it needs to be. So I compost in the most simple way possible, and I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years. I make a lot of compost every year, and I'm going to tell you all the basics of composting, what to use, what not to use, how much, all that. And then I'm going to actually build a pile from scratch, and we can see it break down. Now, I'm not trying to set any speed records of composting faster than anyone else, but I do it fairly passively and it works great. So let's get into it. Okay, so to make compost, you need 4 basic ingredients for the bacteria to get going. You need some green material that's green and leafy. That's your nitrogen source. You need something that's kind of papery, like cardboard or newspaper. That's your brown material. You need to have some water. It needs to be moist, but not soggy wet. And then you also need a little bit of air in there. And with those 4 ingredients, you'll get the good bacteria to break down your stuff and make a compost very quickly. Now, what green materials do you need? Okay, so kitchen scraps of pretty much any kind, if it's coming from a plant, is okay. Apple cores, banana peels, they're all great. Grass clippings are about the best green material there is for getting it hot quickly. And another one that's good is coffee grounds, which it's quite regularly used, but any kind of green leafy yard waste will work fine as well. It's just keep it plant-based and you'll be okay. You can also use egg and shrimp shells, but not the egg or shrimp. But anyways, let's jump to brown material. So this is like regular paper newspaper, cardboard, regular corrugated cardboard that doesn't have paint on it or tape or stickers or anything, and sawdust. I love sawdust as compost because of all the surface area it already has. It's kind of like pre-shredded. And then dried leaves. in the fall. Those are great brown material to use as well. Now, what you should never compost or not compost is anything that's glossy from the brown stuff. So like this cardboard here is glossy, reflecting light. That stuff's not going to break down very well, and I don't know what kind of chemicals could or could not be in that. Also, the high glossy newspaper inserts you get in the mail, I stay away from those. And then anything that's not plant-based, like meats and cheeses, don't do it. It'll break down, but it's going to take a long time, and it's probably going to attract some raccoons or other animals that maybe you don't want tearing up your pile in the process. Okay, so I compost on the ground, and I usually have 3 piles going. All right, so my first pile is the one that I add to, and I continually add to it every couple of days. Every time I fill up my little silver bucket in the kitchen, it's coming out here right onto there. Next, I have my pile that is basically completely done. And this stuff is what I can take from and use. I can store some in buckets if I want. It's all good. And then I have my third pile, which is almost there. So there's still organic matter in this, but it's just not quite fully done. So I'll leave this one to the worms to finish off. I'll turn it once a week, and that's about it. Now, I'm a big proponent of keeping your compost on the ground because the worms will find it. So even if it's not hot composting at the moment, the worms will come in here and help break down remaining organic matter. So that's just kind of a big benefit of keeping it on the ground if your situation allows for it. I'm a big fan of it. Okay, so we are going to start a brand new compost pile. And this was all filmed on May 3rd, 2020. And let's get started on it. So I've got all my materials, and I saved them up for this video. I've got around 2.5 gallons of kitchen scraps, which, normally I just take them out as I accumulate them. I don't normally store them, but I also had a bunch of grass clippings I saved from mowing the lawn the day before. And again, these are like the best thing in the world for nitrogen source. For my brown materials, I'm going to be using, this is like that packing paper from Amazon, so I'll tear this up into strips. That's excellent stuff. And then I have a whole bunch of, brown stuff that I just store in my basement. Every time I get a package from Amazon or Christmas time, I spend an hour just tearing stuff up into little strips and save it. It really comes in handy, which we'll talk about further later. But in addition to that, and this is something, if you know a woodworker or you are one yourself, your sawdust is an outstanding source of brown material. I love it because it's already like so shredded up. It's sawdust. It's complete surface area. It's excellent. So to build a pile, what do you do? Well, you probably heard this before, but I'm going to repeat it anyways. You start with layers. You layer your browns, then your greens, then your browns, then your greens, and you keep doing it. This is just the easiest way to kind of get that going. And so I'm using all my materials that I showed you here today. Normally I just use whatever's available, but you just constantly mix them up, and you'll notice that my sawdust and my cardboard are pretty dry, so I'm going to have to add water here in a bit. But as I mix, though, you'll also notice that I'm stirring it up as I go. I don't leave it as layers. This stuff wasn't meant to be separated. It's meant to be mixed, so that's how I do it. So mix them thoroughly as you're doing this. Getting it all together is going to be better that way. A bunch of brown material segregated from the green material isn't going to do anything. And while you're doing this, as you're building your pile, water it, and it's mainly to water the brown material. So, the sawdust is dry, the cardboard's dry. It needs to get about as wet as a wrung out sponge. And before I forget, what I tried to target for my proportions is 50% green, 50% brown. That usually seems to be the best target, but don't get hung up on that. Like, if you're a little too far one way or the other, you can always supplement it with just adding more green later or just turning it more frequently if you have too much green. In fact, you really should. Just because as the green material breaks down and it kind of compresses itself, it'll eventually get to a place where there's no air. And if there's no air, then the bad bacteria will take over. And we'll see a special case of that with the grass clippings here in a couple of minutes. But you don't want that to happen because that's the anaerobic bacteria taking over. It breaks stuff down. It just takes forever, and it's sludgy and mucky, and it's slow. So anyways, and you've probably also noticed me grabbing a handful of my compost from my old pile and throwing it in there. And that's just kind of to jumpstart with the good bacteria. If you don't have a compost pile to take from, use a handful of soil from your yard or garden. It'll do just the same. The bacteria is already there. And just putting it into your newly formed compost pile is just going to jumpstart everything a little quicker. But that's it, though. I mean, it's just layer, mix, water, layer, mix, water, rinse and repeat. Anyways, as you can see, I'm making quite a big pile. This one's going to have no problem heating up. I make as big a pile as I have green material available. So if I don't have much green material, I don't sweat it. I add it anyways, even if it's smaller. Again, I'm on the ground. The worms are going to give me an assist with forming worm castings. So, okay. So I'm in a unique situation. This is what it looks like halfway across my yard. You can kind of see the compost piles back there by the forest. From my house, you really can't make it out so well. So I'm in a unique position, and I understand that most people may not be, and they may want to make like a pallet fence or something to kind of hide the compost or get a tumbler. But I understand that, but I just wanted to show that. Okay, this is May 5th. The compost pile is 2 days old, and I came out here one morning to add another bucket of kitchen scraps, and she's smoking, and it's hot, and I like it. That's what we want to see. That's all that nitrogen breaking down from the bacteria. The bacteria kind of basically pass gas, and that's what heats up everything. As far as I understand, they give off heat and air. Now, anyways, I ran back in and grabbed my infrared thermometer. I don't have one of those big thermometers for temperature probes, so I have to use this. But anyways, the ground surrounding the pile is 60 Fahrenheit, and we'll check the temperature inside. Yeah, it's a good sign when you can see it steaming as soon as you turn it, you know, and it's hot to touch in the middle there. I mean, you'll figure that out real quick, but okay. So after being exposed to the air for a couple minutes, it's still 118 Fahrenheit, so that's pretty good. I know they target 150, but I don't have a way to measure that, so, and actually there, it went above 130, so it's probably close to 150 inside the pile. Just once you expose it to air, that changes. And before I forget, all the information I'm telling you here is available at an article on our website, which I will link to in the description. So if you want to get a quick reference after watching this video, and like maybe you're out standing by your pile, you can pull up that article instead of sitting through a whole video trying to find where I talk about something specific. It's just faster. Anyways, yeah, so I just keep mixing it. And with grass, you really, really, really need to mix it daily. Because it breaks down so quickly that the grass is going to want to mat up and layer up on you. And when that happens, if it goes into sludge form, where it's the anaerobic bacteria, you can get it back, but it's not very fun to do so. Okay, now we're 5 days old. It is still smoking, or steaming, I should say. So again, a good sign. There's not as much grass visible, and it's still very, very hot, though, in the middle. So there, it's been exposed to the air for about 5-10 seconds, and let's see what it says. 128 Fahrenheit. So it's pretty hot in there yet. So that's excellent. That's what I want to see. And again, you have to keep turning this stuff though. And you don't just flip it once or twice. I mean, I really mix it up. I'm not showing you all the footage because, I mean, it gets boring just watching someone turn a pile. But anyways, I keep adding more and more green stuff to my pile as I go. Keep turning it, keep mixing it, because as the grass starts to layer up, and it'll kind of form like little balls you can almost peel them apart like pages in a book, which I kind of found some here. This kind of shows it. I didn't let it get bad, but you can see how I'm just separating it almost like pages in a book. This will turn into sludge if I'm not careful. What you're about to see right here is footage from a year ago, a pile that I neglected and had way too much greenery on this topic. What do we got? Well, we're going to try to use 50-50 green to brown material by volume. And again, you always want to keep an excess amount of brown material on hand. That way, if it goes too much to the green, you can always add brown. It's easy to store brown because it's just cardboard. Turn this stuff frequently. Keep an eye on the moisture. If it doesn't feel like a wrung out sponge, then you want to add some. And if you can keep the pile on the ground, you should do so. I mean, you might get a little benefit from the worms like I do. That's a good thing. And, it helps speed everything along. But anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. This will be part of a large playlist on soil building, soil testing, vegetable gardening that I'll make in the coming months as I release more videos. But I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you guys very much.